Buenas noches, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. As always, muchas gracias to everyone for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, and the love and support you guys extend my way. Also, to those that have been helping me get the message out there and supporting the channel by liking, sharing, subscribing, and hyping the video, do know from the heart I'm forever humble and appreciated to you. Gracias. Well, today I'm gonna touch on Playboy from White Fans, or as I personally came to know him, right? Wolfie from White Fans. You see, we worked hand in hand in Corcoran shoe for Artie from King Cobras, and there's been a camarada that's been asking me to touch on him, right? And just a word of advice, if you go down the playlist, there's a couple videos on Playboy. Again, we did a lot of things, but there's certain things I'll stay away from, if you get what I'm saying. Nevertheless, this is gonna circle around how, you could be homeboys on the street from the same neighborhood and become bitter on the inside and become enemies per se, right? And it's just see who has the strongest upper hand to move on the next individual. But anyways, allow me to make sense, right? I'll first take you back to Backerville. As you guys know, there was no time to get ready. It was who could make it out there, who wanted to go out there and, you know, buckle up against norteños and get our butt whoops. Well, in this riot, I met a good homie. Well, I met him good in the hole, right? In the riot, we met for the first time at the table and we took off, right? Nevertheless, it's the homie Chato from White Fence. He's older than myself, but he's a good cat, good individual. He was a clown, straight up. Ham, Diablo from King Cobras. What was homie's name from Garrity, some older out there. Anyways, you know, we got to know each other on our way, mostly in Willis, right in the hole. And again, he was a good cat, right? But his end goal wasn't to be in prison. Of course, he's there, so he's gonna boot up, lace up, and do what he has to do, right? But his goal was to get out and stop going in and out. Anyways, from there they would split us up and we would go different spots. I went down south. I believe him and Shaggy went to Tehachapi, if I'm not mistaken. Nevertheless, I'm even touching on this homie because I recently seen him on just by chance on YouTube, right? Talking about he's enjoying his grandkids, he's enjoying his freedom, and in his own words, and his firmes. When at least for myself, it's firmes to see a camarada actually push forward, right? Stop being in that circle of going and coming in and out, right? Or just getting stuck eventually. Nevertheless, we would go our separate ways and, I would eventually hit Corcoran shoe. Again, when I got there, of course, I have I had been helping. Well, you guys know, with numerous appealees, just here and there, working with candy with them, whatever, right? So when I got there, I put myself on this position too hardy, and is when I got asked if I could hold the responsibility for a shoe, right? And well, dispuesto, right? I opened my mouth, so vámonos. At this time it was starting to circle around how Artie was. So not too many people wanted to do things for Artie. Basically, they didn't want to wreck. Nevertheless, my direct pipeline was Indio, that was Artie's right hand man, and Wolfie was his left hand. Even Wolfie being a carnali, he was tough behind Artie. I always been a smart individual in the sense that I don't lose track of the differences, right? What I mean is, it's real easy to friend a Billy like Playboy. Again, I call him Wolfie, sorry. And lose track of who he is and get caught up. I've seen it numerous of times. So I try to keep it professional with him, right? Nevertheless, I was in four right and in two left. Chato drove up. Chato drove up and, for whatever reason, he settled up with his homeboy Wedo from White Fence. And they bumped heads. Even though they were from the same neighborhood, I guess they couldn't live together, right? It just happens. And Wolfie took offense to it. Because Wedo, I don't know in which way, do excuse, I don't remember. He was a direct family or married into his family, I don't know. Something to that effect, right? So he started politicking against Chato. Even though they're the same age, they're from the same neighborhood, clica, todo. He still, he wanted to pull Chato's wig. Now keep in mind, I had a yard. Me and Chato, we went back to Backerville, so I knew what color ran down his back, right? I knew he was a good homie, and I knew that what happens when he sailed up, and I knew the reasons, and he wasn't in the wrong. So what I did is I requested to put in a bed move, and I was gonna try to move him over there with me, which had happened. With the timing, I ended up moving him up there with the homie from 18th Street, and then it started. We went from being professional to that famous card. Hey, this is besides the point. You know who I am. Da 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 da. And basically, he wanted shot to whack, which I could respect it, but I wasn't going to do it. I mean, I was nobody, never been nobody, but I did know I was holding that place down for Artie, right? And well, at the time there was already, you could say, talk about Playboy, cause he was one of the main angles on the meth coming in and all the homies being sprung out. So I would later find out when I got validated, right? But anyways, something I don't advise to do is to ever go over a pili. Cause you take the chance that the other pili is gonna say chales, and at the same time you minimizing a pili, and you're done. But I did so, right? Cause I felt Wolfie wasn't doing anything. He was just under Artie, helping him just like any other camarada. And I guess he had his reasons, right? And I went to Artie and I told him, look, I got a favor to ask. Then I told him, look, we're Güero in here and this is what happened. I understand, he's related to Playboy. And I respect his wishes to the fullest, right? I just think the homie don't have it coming. I personally was on the yard. We held it down. He's a good vato. It was an incel thing. I'm not gonna say it ended up better than homie defending his pride, right? Cause Artie ended up clearing it by clipping the homie with feria. I believe 500 if I'm not mistaken, right? And we started distancing ourselves, me and Playboy. For that reason, he didn't say nothing at all, cause it would be like going against Artie, right? But I knew from that moment it's like walk on eggshells around Playboy, cause they just don't let go of things like that, right? But a lot of things unfolded in Corcoran, and I started sending them appeals to Indio, to Artie, with Speedy, with Sal, rest in peace, with through Law Library Medical, and you guys pretty much know what happened, right? I ended up getting validated, and I would end up going to B Yard. I actually ended up in between Artie and Playboy and Indio, and as soon as I left, I guess is when Playboy did his move and had Chato White. I mean, he put a mark on the homie's face for no apparent reason. At the end of the day, ain't nobody gonna question him. You see the rest of the Peelies from White Fence, pretty much they were all in the feds or they were no good now. Again, the doings of him and Artie, that was between them, right? All I knew they were like nail and dirt, which is none of my business, right? To even speak on. But I would end up over there and unfortunately we get put in that spot when we know we're in what's right and what's wrong and we have to shut up and put up and just put up with things. When I heard of this, of course, I wanted to press the issue. I wanted to hoop bang for the homie, but I couldn't. Cause at the end of the day, we're all taking care of the career, right? That famous career in prison. You know, like a lot of people say on YouTube, I guess, that good standings, right? Good status, which, it was my belief to the bone. It still is. That's why I always push for not poison, just common sense, right? Nevertheless, I would always wonder what ended up happening with the homie. He never locked it up. The homie got hit. He went through the investigation, then he went back on program. You know, Playboy got told, that's tuvo, right? You did what you did, leave it alone. Already wanted that angle, right, of white fans, which I think that's why Sporty, you didn't really hear him doing anything, right? Because instead of lacing up his neighborhood as much possible, he was doing things against his neighborhood, which is funny, how it tends to always play out like that. Nevertheless, and I'm not gonna say I was happy, because the loss of a good camarada, right? Again, one of the ones I used to touch in the most from A year to B year was Sal from Torrance, and is the one Wino had him killed by his celly, you know, for sending a book to his cell. I really need to get into detail of Wino, cause just in Corcoran, when Sal happened, he already had two people he had killed in Corcoran. And I want to touch on it just so you guys know the individual this cat was. Nevertheless, the word was Playboy behind the scenes was supporting Wino. You see, if there was a Billy back there, well, in their head, right? And this is my opinion, that could replace Artie back there was Wino. Because of his antiquity and his reach, right? Nevertheless, Wino had a tale he was carrying from many angles, right? And it was a lie. Old man Barry was back there. Fox was there. Boo Boo was there. You know, Smilone at the time was there. There was numerous appeals that could have easily taken that place instead of duty, right? As you guys know. But it's just the way they formed their alliance and start politicking to those at one time. They get real close and get to learn all their inner works. And then they turn around and use it against them. You see, that's what those that haven't been in that, of course, right? You could go in, try to be as loyal as you can to your beliefs, but it just don't work that way. Again, I know I repeat myself, but sadly, you're gonna run into homeboys from your neighborhood, and every day you wake up, you're gonna be thinking, I hope none of these fools mess up, cause I know I'm gonna be called to bat against them. They're gonna have you move against your own homeboys. And when your neighbor hits about it, that you moved on your own homeboy, you might not be no good, but you're not gonna be welcome in your neighborhood. I guarantee you that. You know, a lot of people don't care. Again, they lower flag down. With me, that's ranking it, right? But again, those are personal beliefs. Nevertheless, after this play, we end up getting clear. Wino would be just the one to get his wings clipped, and things continue to unfold. I remember we went out to the dog cages, and you could say we had a good conversation, me and Playboy. And I'll be honest with you guys, I thought Homeboy was full of. There was just something about him, it didn't sit well with me. No, I already knew you couldn't trust as far as I could pick up and throw. But Playboy really tried to play that part as a camarada, you know. But you knew he had an agenda. You see, later on it would turn out he was hurting camaradas from his own neighborhood by, what yard you're going to? I'm going to Salinas. A yard. Alright. Hey, there's so and so from the neighborhood there. Okay, when you get there, whack 'em. So the homie confident, you know what Billy sending me will go whack 'em. And then when he would start answering up for it, Playboy's answer would be like, whack that fool, I didn't send him. Must have been a personal issue from the streets that's not allowed inside. He was famous for that. But again, it's just a small glimpse to those that are not there, haven't been there, to don't believe about that ser camaradas inside, loyalty, about respect inside. Everything we do is behind respect. But imagine them asking you something like that, your own homeboy, or telling you your mom comes every weekend and put some dope in her hand and she has to bring it in. No buts or ifs. You like your status, she's gonna bring it in. That's not respect. So push for your neighborhood the right way, where it counts, where it should be, inside. You leave it at the gate when you go to prison. Most importantly, stay true to yourself and loyal to loved ones. Buenas noches.
This is what we started. We always